Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm an alcoholic. All right. So just to kind of get myself centered, I'm going to go through my regular spiel. My sobriety date is May 20th, 2004. I have a sponsor who not only knows that she is my sponsor, but is current on what is going on in my life. That has become an important distinction for me. I have a home group. It's the Love and Service group. I have commitments in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have the privilege of sponsoring as well. So I have been taught that my job is to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. So we'll just jump right on in. You're getting my good side. Yeah. That's important. So I grew up just down the road a little bit in Walnut Creek. I had the fortune to be born into an absolutely incredible family. My parents are honestly just the most fantastic people you will ever meet. They've adopted a lot of my friends into our family. I was involved in sports. I did well in school. I was encouraged. I was challenged. I was nurtured, right? Like I had a truly beautiful, beautiful childhood. And I share that because I remember coming into the rooms my first go around, and I thought that there needed to have been some sort of catastrophic event or something really traumatic in my upbringing to cause me to drink the way that I did. Because from the very beginning, I drank to escape. I drank because I couldn't stand being me and I couldn't stand being in my skin. But there's no real reason for that, right? There's not like I can look back at my past and be like, that's why. Right. And so I share that in case someone else can have that experience or has that same experience and can relate. What happened is I took my first drink when I was in 8th grade, and leading up to that first drink, and it's a bunch of 8th grade girls. We're in the back of their parents' pickup truck in the driveway, and we have box wine, and it's going to be fabulous. And before I took that first drink, I was afraid that I was going to be an alcoholic. And the reason that I had this somewhat abnormal fear for a 13-year-old is because my mom is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. She got sober when I was young, and I was raised knowing a little bit about the disease of alcoholism. I was raised knowing a little bit about Alcoholics Anonymous. My understanding was that it could be a genetic disease that I might suffer from one day, and that being an alcoholic was bad. And so I had this fear before I took that drink. And I expressed this fear to the girls that I was with, and they looked at me like I was insane. And what happened is I took that drink and I had this moment of clarity. And it was in that moment that I knew to the depths of my soul that I was not an alcoholic. And that just gave me permission to go out and drink and use as much as I wanted to from that point forward. And it was like, I got the green light and I went, right? I can't tell you the second time that I drank or anything after that, because it was just like, all of a sudden, this is what I did. Right. I went from being a straight A student, honor roll, doing year-round sports. Like I was that like poster child for like being a good kid, to within a matter of months, like a complete 180, like totally different. Because what happened is I found the thing that made being me bearable. Right. Because like I said, there's no real reason that I was seeking to escape being who I was, but I just couldn't stand being in my own skin. And what alcohol did is it freed me from that. I've heard a lot of people talk about their reaction to alcohol and how it made them feel taller and prettier and a better dancer and more comfortable talking to people. And that's really not the effect that alcohol had on me. What alcohol did for me is it numbed me out. It made me not care because I was so incredibly focused on where I fit into the world or where I felt like I didn't fit into the world. And I can remember being in elementary school and obsessing about my friend's friends, right? And like if she was better friends with them than she was friends with me. And I would use that comparison to determine where I fit in and what my worth was. And that's kind of how I looked at relationships for most of my life and well into my addiction and early recovery. But what happened is when I drank, I didn't have to care about that. And I just got to kind of check out and tune out and just be like, F you, like I'm fine, right? It was my way to just shut it all off because I just felt too much and I felt too strongly. And so when I was drinking or when I was using, I didn't have to feel like that. And that became this solution for me. It became the solution I didn't even know that I was looking for. And so immediately this became the priority. Everything else that had been important stopped being as important. And I slowly kind of did that backslide into being a little degenerate, right? And it happened very quickly. The girls that I was drinking with in the back of that pickup truck, within a matter of months, like we're not friends anymore because I have other friends that drink more. And then they're starting to slowly make comments about the way that I'm drinking and the things that I'm mixing and whether or not that's an overdose and like just a lot of negativity. And so like, I don't need that in my life. And so I move my way over to that group. And like, I finally end up, through a series of those kind of shifts, I end up with the people who drink and use the way that I do. And these are my people, right? We talk about like lower companions in the room, and I don't personally relate to that because like that is me. Like was no better or worse than them. Like we drank the same, and we had the type of relationship that if you passed out in the gutter on a good day, you turn their head. Right? Like otherwise, like that's your problem. And like we kind of carry on. And so like these are my people because they don't care what I'm doing. They don't care what I'm mixing. They don't care how often I'm doing it. They don't care if I'm blacking out. They don't care what, you know what I mean? Like nothing matters. And so I just get to drink the way that I want to. And the way that I want to drink is not pretty. I don't know what 15-year-old does drink pretty, but I was not the example of that. And I sought out the places that made me feel comfortable. And those types of environments are ones that I had absolutely no business being in. I sought out these people that had the same kind of morals that I did, and those weren't fantastic. And I sought out these dark, dingy places with dark, dingy people. And I did not feel comfortable in environments with like lights because that's way too bright. So I did a lot of drinking under freeway overpasses and in parking garages and just like under bridges and with people that I had, again, no business associating with. And needless to say, things didn't end up going well for me. Eventually, my parents kind of caught on to the fact that like something's wrong, right? Like this is like kind of like a body snatcher situation. Like I'm no longer the daughter that they had raised. And at 15, I got put into rehab. And that wasn't even that shocking for me because, like, again, everyone I knew was in rehab. We would have detox parties on Sunday nights because we were all getting tested on Monday. And so anyways, we had like a whole system in place. It worked out great. But so I go into rehab at 15, and what rehab did for me is it introduced me to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because even though my mom is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, she never forced me into the rooms. She was able to practice attraction rather than promotion. And that truly baffles me. The older that I get, the longer that I've been sober, like that she was able to do that. And I'm incredibly grateful that she did. Because by the time I ended up in AA, I didn't look at you all as my mom's friends, and this wasn't my mom's club. And I was able to come in and find a solution that I needed. So rehab introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it also introduced me to substances that helped me hit my bottom faster. And which I feel like is important, right? Like it's what else is rehab for? But so my life started spinning out of control as a result of all of that. But I didn't see anything wrong with the way that I was living my life. What I thought my problem was that my parents were too strict. Like if they would just leave me alone, like I'm an adult, I'm 15, which I teach high schoolers now. And, oh my God, you are not an adult. But that is what I believed my problem was, is that they were just too strict. And so I was coming into meetings and I just could not identify because I was the youngest person by far that I was seeing in the rooms. And I'm going to meetings with like old people. right? Like 25, 26, right? Like insane. And by the way, the speaker last week said that joke and I was pissed. It was my joke. So anyways, and I was going into these rooms and I couldn't relate, but people were so kind to me and they just kept welcoming me back because I could not string together more than a couple of days. And no matter how sloppy I came in, or the fact that I would come in loaded, or I would come in and eat the cookies and then leave, I was always welcomed back into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm so grateful for that. This was the only place where anyone wanted me back. So I was coming in and out of the rooms for about 9 months. Within that time frame, I tried to get sober a couple of times. But again, I couldn't imagine that I actually had a problem. And then, kind of through some divine intervention, I was seeing a therapist at this time. And for whatever reason, this one day came where I was honest with her about what was actually happening in my life. I think my parents thought I had 5 months sober at this time. And funny story about that, actually. So there used to be this recovery boutique store in Walnut Creek called the Anonymous Place. There was a little meeting room behind it. And it had books and jewelry and medallions and all that good stuff. It was really, really cute. And so my mom and I are in downtown Walnut Creek one day and we stop in, and my mom's been sober forever. So she knows the person behind the counter, working, and she's bragging about how her daughter's sober and it's so great. And the woman is so kind. She's like, "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. How much time do you have?" And I'm like, I can't remember when I told my parents I relapsed last. And so I'm frantically doing math about when was the last time I told them I relapsed. And I came up with 5 months was the number that I came up with. And she gave me a 5-month chip and I still have it. I did not I had maybe 5 minutes. I was nowhere near 5 months. But so my parents, thought I was sober during this time because I'm a liar and a manipulator. And I would use that fact that I was sober to have them let me go out unsupervised so I could go get drunk. And I would throw a fit if she wanted to check that parents were there. Because again, 15, 16, that seems like a reasonable request from a parent whose daughter has a drinking problem. And I would throw a fit about how she didn't start trusting me. I would be forced to go out and drink again. She needed to start trusting me so I could rebuild my life, right? And in no way was there any sort of parental supervision where I was going. Anyway, so I'm a liar manipulator. My parents think that I'm sober. I'm seeing this therapist. And for whatever reason, I got honest with her about how bad it was getting, because it was getting bad. And I was finding myself in worse and worse situations. And I was having a lot of other things happening that were just slowly deteriorating my spirit and my mental health and all of that. And so I told her what was going on. And I believe that I have a couple of people who have been put into my life that changed the trajectory of my life. And I believe that they were sent to me by my higher power, and this woman is one of them. And I told her what was going on, and she told me that that she was in fear for my life, and that since I was 16 and a minor, and she was a mandated reporter, that either I came clean to my parents about what was going on, or she was going to. She's like, "You're gonna die." And so I convinced her to give me a couple of days before I had to come clean to my parents. At this point, I knew that the next step for me was going to be a wilderness program in Utah. My parents were not subtle. They showed me the brochures. I knew where I was going. And so I convinced her to give me a couple of days. And the night before I had to come clean to my parents, I got loaded in my room by myself. And I ended up writing this letter to them. And it was 16 pages long, front and back. I had a lot to say. But in this letter, I admitted to what I had been doing. And I admitted to how bad it was getting. And in that letter, I admitted that I couldn't stop. And that was the first time that I had ever conceded that I could not stop. Because, like I said, I had been coming in and out of the rooms for about 9 months. And there were times where I wanted it. there were times where I was gonna get sober. I have my original big book and I have like 4 or 5 different sobriety dates written on the inside cover, crossed off. I got smart at the end and I wrote it in pencil. And so my current sobriety date is written in pencil, and my sponsor saw it and handed me a red pen. So it's pencil and then red pen over it. But what would happen is I would be hurting and I would want to get sober, right? And I would go to my sponsor and I'd be like, I'm ready, like, let's do this. And then a couple of days goes by and I'm not hurting as much anymore, right? Like I have a couple of days between me and whatever that catastrophe was. And then someone has something, right? And biology is really boring if you're not loaded. And so I changed my mind because I decided that I had really overreacted when I was getting that whole getting sober thing. And so like I changed my mind. And so I had believed that each time I relapsed, it was me just changing my mind. So in this letter to my parents was the first time that I ever acknowledged that like I could not stop. Not that I wanted to, but just that I couldn't. And I said, you know, maybe someday, like the pain that I'm putting you all through, because I was aware of what I was doing to my family. Maybe someday the pain that I'm putting you through will help me get sober, but it's not going to be today. And so I go into that therapist's office and I read this letter to my mom, and I'm expecting a very dramatic scene in the therapist's office with lots of tears and shouting and all this kind of stuff. And what happens is, without my permission, the words came out of my mouth, please help me get sober. And I don't know why it was that moment, because again, the night before I didn't even leave my bedroom, right? Like it was in no way the worst night that I had. It was in no way the most traumatic thing that happened to me. It was almost tame, right? And so I don't know why it was that moment, but that was my moment. And I started going back to meetings, and I met up with that woman who had been my sponsor, and I told her like, all right, I'm ready. Like, let's do this. And the way that I have been able to make sense of that moment in time and of my early sobriety, looking back on it, is that for whatever reason in that moment, I was granted just enough willingness to try something different. And each time I followed a direction, each time I took a suggestion, each time I made a contrary action, I was given just enough willingness to take the next one, right? And I kind of just like pieced together my sobriety, just like following one suggestion at a time, right? And I am someone who, unfortunately, to this day, like don't take suggestions well, because I am incredibly stubborn and always correct. So I just don't need your input. So for me to get to a point where I'm willing to take suggestions typically means that I'm in a lot of pain. And so that's kind of where I was at that time. So now I'm sober. And I'm 16 and I'm a sophomore in high school, and I don't see this ending well, but I just don't know what else to do. I envisioned a very boring existence. I envisioned Friday nights watching movies with my parents, and that was kind of gonna be it. And I was like, well, it's still better than what was happening, right? And very, very fortunately for me, that was not how it went. I ended up getting involved in Young People's and Alcoholics Anonymous at this, right? At this time, there was a thriving Young People's in the area, and I started going to these events and these dances and these parties. And then eventually I started going to the business meetings of the committees that are putting on these events. And now I'm learning about what service is and what it takes to put on an event for 200, 300 people. And now I'm on the committee and I'm helping put on the events. And I started getting involved in Young People's, and it taught me, how to be accountable, and it taught me how to do something for somebody else, which was a kind of a foreign concept for me. Because what happened is, going through the book with my sponsor is when I discovered what was wrong, right? Like I was able to identify the problem and then was given a solution to it, which is what I needed, right? But I was still so incredibly uncomfortable in my skin. And service is what saved me from that. Because I was taught that when I'm uncomfortable, go do something. Don't make it about you. Go clean coffee cups, open the door, you know what I mean? And so I was able to start getting involved in service. And then my life got really, really full and really, really fun, right? And I wasn't spending Friday nights at home with my family, that's for sure. I remember I was a junior and I had just come back from my first ACIPA, which is All California Young People's and Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was down in Oxnard, California. And there's like 2,000 people that take over it, young people who take over a hotel and have meetings and dances and all sorts of shenanigans. And I remember I come back and I'm sitting in first period Spanish class, and everyone's talking about whatever party was happening that weekend and how cool it was. And I'm just like, oh, really? Because I went on a road trip by myself to LA and hung out with all these people in a hotel. You know what I mean? And I was just like, okay, life's going to be good. Like life's okay. And so I really dove into young people's, and my world got really big and I got really, really full in service. And I became just absolutely enmeshed in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was doing everything, and I was going to all of the events, and I was sponsoring, and I was just on fire. And at this time, I had a really close friend who was realizing that she would never have a relationship with her mother unless she was the one to put in the work, because there had been a lot of bad situations that had happened in that relationship. And so she was directed by people in her fellowship and her sponsor how to go about manufacturing a relationship from nothing, right? And so I got to watch the actions that she took to build and to create this relationship with a mother there was a lot of bad blood. And it made me realize that I had this absolutely fantastic family that had always supported me and loved me and all of that. And all they wanted was for me to come over for dinner occasionally, return their phone calls. Like they weren't asking much. And I just wasn't available because I was so involved in AA. And I realized that my parents had lost me for a second time. The first time it was to my addiction, and then the second time was to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I watched the actions that my friend took, and I got to start emulating it. And I got to start to repair that relationship with my family. Because I had gone through my steps, I had made my amends. My parents were just they just want yes, just keep doing what you're doing, just stay sober, right? Like just stay in AA. That's what we want. That's how you can make it right. But I realized through this that I had not actually amended that relationship. I had caused so much harm in my family as a result of my addiction and my alcoholism, that just saying I'm sorry wasn't going to cut it. And so I got to start to show up, and I got to start to be accountable to them, and I got to be a daughter, and I got to be a sister. And that the relationship with my sister was the one that really opened my eyes to the impact that I had on my family, because my sister is 5 years younger than I am. So when I was in the midst of my disease, she was in elementary school. And I have told you about how I had this absolutely like picturesque upbringing, childhood, just so blessed, right? I robbed her of that because I introduced unsafe people and cops and running away and having me be missing. You know what I mean? Like all of these things, and fights and horrible, horrible knockdown, drag out fights in our house. So she wasn't granted that same privilege that I was. And then after I got well, I disappeared, right? And I was no longer available. And so I got to that was the one that I had to really put in the most work on, really show up for. And I had to be the one that was available and accountable, and took her to school, and, you know what I mean, was there to talk when she needed it, and got to show through my actions that we could have a different relationship. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous and the example that has been shown to me, I was able to do that. And today we have an absolutely beautiful relationship. So, I have this beautiful relationship with my family. I'm super solid in my recovery, love my fellowship, love my home group, right? Like things are going good. And then I meet him. It turns out okay. But so I meet this guy, and he was different from any guy I had dated before. It was very much like I was being shown kind of what my ideals looked like and who I should be with. And I found this guy, and we started a relationship. And I very quickly realized that like he was my person. And a few years into our relationship, he also got to come and become a part of my family, right? And see the relationship that we had. And he realized that he wanted to go and do some work to create stronger relationships with his family. And his family was up in Portland. He was feeling this really strong call to like be up in Portland and be with his family. And I did not want to go with him to Portland, but I also, again, believed that this was the person I was supposed to be with. And so I made a decision through counsel with my sponsor and through inventory and prayer and discussions with family and friends, made a fully formed decision as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, who was also an adult, to move up to Portland. And I was cautioned before I moved that moving in sobriety is great and it can be absolutely fantastic. And moving with time can be great, but you go up there and people are really happy to see you and they're happy that you're there. And then the focus kind of naturally just shifts to the newcomer. So I was instructed that it was my responsibility to move up there to insert myself into the fellowship and to do the things that I knew how to do, which was get a home group, get a sponsor, get a commitment, get sponsees, right? Like, and they're like, how to, like, you're good. You know how to do this. Like, you've been doing this for 12 years. Just do that up there. And I'm like, got it. And so I go up there, don't got it. What happened was I moved up there and, as I mentioned, did not actually want to be up there. And I think I mentioned before that I'm stubborn. And so I didn't do those things that I swore to everyone I was going to do. And I went up there and I fell into the darkest depression of my life. I was going to just enough meetings to kind of justify that I was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I would truthfully wait in my car until 30 seconds before the meeting started, so I didn't have to talk to you. And then as soon as the meeting was over, ran out the door, and I was so dry. I was so dry and I was so miserable, and it lasted for like 5 years. And I'm not a great communicator, just in general, but especially when I'm in pain. I don't like emotions at all. The good ones are okay, but like they're not great. Like I would just, I don't like emotions. And so when there's the bad emotions and I have to talk about them with other people, like, meh. And then on the phone, even worse. So I am just not talking to anyone about what's going on. Not really. And I am getting worse and worse and worse, but I'm able to justify to myself that it's okay, because during this time in this transition, I decided that I wanted to be a teacher. And so I went back to school, and this was my first time really truthfully attempting college. And I was doing amazing. Like I discovered that people used libraries for studying, right? I did all the things, like I sat in the front and I asked questions and I showed up early, right? Like all the things I was supposed to be doing in meetings, I was actually doing at school. But so I was doing really, really good at school, and so I was able to be like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Look at this. I'm on all of these honor list things that I didn't know existed. Like I'm okay. But I spent all of my free time crying on a bathroom floor. And it got to a point where I had 16 years sober. And I could not understand what the point of doing this anymore was. And I believe that the reason that I didn't pick up a drink is, again, stubborn. But it got to a point where I didn't want to continue on, and I became suicidal. And I just couldn't, I didn't see why I would want to continue if it was gonna feel like this. And it had felt like this for so long that at this point I thought I was broken. I saw no hope for it ever getting better. And I was just ready to be done with it. And, you know, like I said, wasn't talking to anyone. And eventually I reached out to to my closest friend, the person that knows me better than almost anybody. And I told her how bad it was, because she knew things were bad. Like, that part was obvious, but not quite how bad and how seriously I was considering certain options. And, and she said those magic words. She said the things that we say to people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. She said, you know what? I know someone who has a similar experience. Why don't you give her a call? And it was a woman that I knew in the Bay Area that I had known for years in my sobriety. And she was someone that I had always respected and looked up to. And so naturally, I was like, I'm going to call her. Eventually I did. I waited a little bit because I'm not going to do that right away. But eventually I called this woman, and I told her that my whole sob story about, being kidnapped up to Portland and being held hostage, and in all of the things, mind you, in all reality, like, I'm the one holding him hostage. Because I'm a treat. And but I'm telling her about how bad it is. And I think, she'll be nice. Maybe she'll like give me a virtual hug. I'm expecting like an "aw, honey, it'll be okay," right? And instead she hurt my feelings. And I'm so incredibly grateful for that, because if I heard one more, "it's gonna be okay," or "I love you," it's gonna be, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that I would be here, right? Instead, she told me what I needed to hear was that I was being incredibly selfish, that I was consumed with self, and that I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. Again, rude. And she's like, you know what's great though? There's a solution for that. Right. And so we started working together, and this was during the pandemic. So I started Zooming into meetings in the Bay Area. And so I was able to be around people that have known me since I was 15, people I wish did not know me since I was 15, because it's very embarrassing. Growing up in AA is fantastic. Love it. Horrible life choice. People see you through all of the really awkward phases and really awkward relationships and hairstyles and all the things. But so I'm in meetings with these people that have known me since I was 5. And it didn't fix it. You know what I mean? Damn it. But I kept trying. And what I relearned is that the solution that is presented to us in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the solution that we find in these rooms, it works, but it works slowly, right? It's not like taking a shot. I'm not just going to feel that warmth trickle down, right? Like, it's going to take a while. And so I have to be patient, and I have to persevere, and I have to keep showing up. And that's what I did. And I kind of forcing myself to do a little bit at a time, and probably not enough, but I was still kind of doing it. And eventually things started to get a little bit better. During this time, my husband and I, he married me. Question his life choices too. My husband and I decided that we were going to be moving back to the Bay Area for a number of different reasons. Not the least of which was that my dad's health was failing. And so we decided to move back here. And I'm like, cool, this is going to solve it, because the problem was the move. So then the moving back is the solution to all the things. And so we moved back, and spoiler, it wasn't the solution. It did help a lot, but what happened is I had to retrain myself how to be a truly active member in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember I was in search of a home group because my home group from before I moved had died, and it was very sad. And I was like, okay, I need a new home group, but nothing's gonna ever be as good as my old home group. So, it's fine, but I'll try and find something. And I ended up at Love and Service. And I remember coming in and being like, I'm uncomfortable, and like, I kind of know some of you, and some of you have known for a really long time, but I don't feel like myself anymore. So I feel like a stranger. Like, it was just so uncomfortable. And I'm like, no, it's supposed to be better. I'm back in California and there's sunshine, right? Like, that's supposed to be the solution. And I just had to keep forcing myself to show up regardless. And it's been proven to me time and time and time and time again that when I show up consistently, when I do the work, even when I don't want to, when I don't understand how this applies to whatever my problem is when I start to feel the results. And so I had to relearn that if I want to live a happy, stable life where I am able to show up as a happy, stable person, I have to do some stuff, right? And it's not hard, but it's also not convenient. And I got to relearn how to do that. And as a result, things did start to get better. And I remember there was one day where it's like I looked around and I didn't feel broken anymore. And I don't even know when it happened, but it was 100% the result of the fact that I was coming to meetings. I was working with a sponsor. I was being useful. I stopped obsessing about myself and my problems, and I started focusing on you, right? The same thing that saved me when I was 16 is the exact same thing that saved me when I was 32, right? And, talk about like divine timing of it all. As I mentioned, we moved down here because of my dad's health, and about two years ago, I think, right around this time, I was actually secretary of this meeting, and my dad we had a time limit for what we were going to have left with him, and he decided to get put on the transplant list, and so we were just waiting for a donor. And we are so blessed that he got a donor, and he's been doing great. But like during that time, I was in so much fear. Because everything was out of my control. Every single aspect of that was out of my control. And if I had not been rooted in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have shown up with my mess. Right? I would have showed up and made it all about me. And I would have shown up and just talked about how much fear I was. And I would have made my parents comfort me during that time. And instead, I got to show up and be useful. And I got to be a person that they could count on. And I got to be the one who supported my mom as she was basically living at the hospital with my dad. I got to be the one that she could count on and show up and drive for everywhere and all this kind of stuff. And again, I would not have been able to do that if I had not found a solution again, right? As my life continues, like life's, it's all the time, even when I don't want to. And I like to think that I am the most tired person in the world. And no one could ever possibly be as tired as I am. And if you had my life, you would understand why I can't make it to that meeting. The worst part is I'm still struggling with this. You would think it would get better, but I have to remind myself that showing up, even when I don't want to, showing up, even when it's cold, showing up, even when my couch is really, really comfortable, right? Even when I'm all snuggled up with a blanket, that is what helps me to be free, right? I work with teenagers, as I mentioned, and I love it. It's absolutely the place that I'm supposed to be, but I have to be the adult in the room. I do it most of the time. Most of the time I don't. But I'm able to see so incredibly clearly how my spiritual fitness impacts how I respond. Because the kids are kids all the time. Like they're teenagers with hormones. And so I can have the exact same situation happen 2 days in a row, dependent on if I'm showing up to meetings, if I'm praying, if I'm meditating, if I'm staying here with my sponsor. I respond to that very differently. I know how I want to show up in my life today, right? I know how I want to show up in my life today. I know how showing up the way that I want to show up makes me feel. And so now it becomes my responsibility to take the actions that enables me to do that. So thank you for allowing me to be of service.